Welcome to Talk Design Podcast, the space where creativity meets conversation. I'm Adrian Ramsey, your host, and as someone deeply entrenched in the world of design, I'm thrilled to introduce you to the minds that inspire me in the hope that they will spark something special within you too. From a design past crafting women's swimwear to pushing the boundaries of performance sportswear, from mountaineering to international yachting, to implementing systematic innovation solutions that transcend boundaries in aerospace industry. My heart remains rooted in architecture, and exploring the emotional tapestry woven by built spaces is my fascination. My journey in design has been what can only be described as a life of design. I want to thank you for lending me your ears. I'm eager to embark on this next episode together. And for those of you who prefer to watch and listen, you can catch this episode at YouTube. That's youtube.com/@TalkDesignPodcast. My guest on Talk Design today is Patricia Culley from BCJ, now in Pittsburgh. Now, I'm going to say that properly. It is Boland Sawinski Jackson, and they're a big firm. They're right across the US, and they have amazing different variety of projects. So they could be doing a single residential home to a tower to a public work. I've interviewed Ray Clabo from BCJ as well, and I'm getting the pleasure of interviewing Patricia. Now, Patricia is a friend of Michael Malone's, and Michael has the most amazing friends. Thank you, Michael. Patricia, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm excited to be here as well.
I want to kick off with a really simple question at the start, and you've listened to a few podcasts. You probably know this question's coming. You were a little girl. Why architecture? You could have gone 100 different ways with your creative skills and your analytical skills. How did you discover that there was even architecture?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I didn't have anyone in my family who was an architect. We did have interior design and engineering in the family, but honestly, when I was young, I didn't speak to anyone about their careers, so I didn't really have someone as a guide into architecture. I think as a lot of guests on the podcast, I was really strong in art, in math, and woodworking. I really enjoyed woodworking. I do distinctly remember in middle school, in one of the courses, having to assess different careers and understanding how they aligned with different skill sets, and architecture came up. And I saw that, okay, art and math, that makes sense. Does it pay well? Yes, it does pay well. Curiously, the information said it does pay well. It aligned with my skills, and so I started to get a nugget of an idea into my head about architecture. I also, as a kid, recall, watching these shows, not like the home improvement shows that you see nowadays, but shows, at this point, 35 years ago, plus years ago, that really focused on how to create spaces and how to fix spaces and the ability to actually use your hands to fix stuff. And that was really interesting to me. So not only understanding conceptually about architecture, but actually applying that concept to your hands and being able to have the skills with your hands to do stuff, that was really interesting.
That tied back to woodwork, I'm guessing.
It did, yeah. So that's sort of my origin story. I think also I just have this curious tendency to want to dive completely into something that I know nothing about, something that's extremely challenging with no guidance. And, I thought architecture, this is it. This is for me.
Well, I don't think you missed it on that part. Everything is a journey, and everything is, it's like you get to create something new every time. So you generally only get to create, one new concept, and then that gets done. And then you get to create another new concept, and that gets done, as opposed to like creating, say, a piece of furniture where
Right.
you get to modify it and change it again and modify it and change it again, and you can evolve it over a bit of time. All that evolvement kind of happens through and then it actually gets built, and then it's too late to evolve it.
That's right. And you move on to the next
Yeah.
project.
And
So,
so that jumping into something, you're saying, jumping into something that is complex and you're not sure how it's going to be done, is so much the architect's journey, because there is no chance to, well, there is, but there's very few chances to modify once it reaches a certain point. And it gets more expensive to modify the later the point becomes. And so I
and
think,
yeah, and I would say honestly, on a lot of the projects that we do within this practice, they're so complex that you've been doing them for, not just 6 months, not just a year, but 3, 4, or 5 years,
yeah,
that you do feel complete and replete when you've done it, and then you're willing to and interested to then take on that next challenge.
that's an interesting thing, so say a project takes 5 years or 4 or 5 years. At those first kind of moments, and I want to play this out a little bit, that in those first kind of moments, there's the story, there's the origin story of what we're going to do. There's the, that whole thing about the need and why it's being built, because very few things get built without a need, or even get planned without a need. There's usually a problem to solve, whether it might be we need more space or we need more facility or whatever. There's a problem to solve. And in saying that, there is those follies that people do, like they'll build a castle in England that's ruins. Have you seen them?
No, I haven't.
So I remember walking in Cambridge, I think it was it Cambridge? Anyway, one of those places out in the countryside with some friends, and go walking, and like you can see the ruins of a castle. And I'm like, far out. So there was a castle out here. There's no other village around it to support it or anything else like this. It was just ruins of a castle. And they had a bit of a laugh at me, and they said, no, it's a folly. And I said, what the hell's a folly? And they said, exactly that, a folly. And I'm like, huh? And they're like, well, the landowner had ruins of a castle built here so that they could look across like they were the new landowner over the land of a previous king or I don't know, lord or whatever. So it's a folly. So there are things that are sometimes built, but there's still a good origin story. Anyway, 5 years or 4 years, whatever, you've got the start point, and that start point obviously gets pushed around a lot in the first opening of the sequence of the design process. When it's 3 years in, and you're heavily into documentation and you've been through planning and all that kind of stuff, how often do you revisit how often does it get revisited, that first design, and somebody goes, no, we've learnt so much more over this time that we need to now make a major change, or even we'll call it a major change. Does that happen?
Um, I would say, so we do look back and think back and try to understand what the original mission and vision of the project is. And we're always trying to make sure that we're tying to that, and whether that is articulated in a specific hand sketch or some narrative or something that communicates this is the original mission, and we want to make sure that this ties throughout the project, whether it is a 5-year long project. So we're always looking back and seeing, are we aligned with that original concept and scheme, and throughout the process, even all the way through construction. And of course, over a project that's that long, so many factors inform how a design progresses and the nuances of it. And you want to make sure that all of that is totally factored in, but you absolutely make sure that it's tied to that original concept.
Yeah, I just go, even construction method or materiality or regulation, those different things can change in that time depending on what is happening. And like, I'll give you a really simple example. In Australia, our new construction code, that national construction code that came out, I don't know, maybe 6-8 months ago, our internal doors in houses shifted from 820 wide, so 820 millimeters wide, to 870 millimeters wide. And so any plan that was not into construction documentation had to adjust. And there were other shifts as well, but didn't have to adjust depending on where it was in the planning process. But we took all ours and adjusted them all. And so you go, and that caused us some issues along the way. There were a few things that we went, oh, okay, that makes it a little bit tight, or a little bit doesn't work the same. It's only 50 mil, it's 2 inches, it's not the end of the world, but just really interesting. Construction code could change, and your ramp lengths could go, oh, they all have to be longer, or something like that. We do a ramp, it's 1, and so every meter it's got to be, for every meter of height, we've got to be 14 meters long. And you can imagine 14 meters of a ramp wrapping. So what is that? That's 14 times 3 is 30, 40 something. So I can't do the math. Just 12 and 30, 42 meters long, like, is that right? Anyway, whatever. But it is a long ramp. It's a long ramp. No, it's 14 meters for every meter, yeah. So if that changes on something, you've got to find a lot of extra space for it. And then that fundamentally shifts all the circulation of the design or the way it's created. And then you got to go, oh, okay, how much space have we got to use or work with? I find those things fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that's a good technical example of something that might cause change over the course of the project. As you were mentioning this, I was thinking through, there are also programmatic and user-based complexity that ties in. And one of the things, we know this because a lot of our projects are for higher ed, and programs change, they're very fluid. And so we're always designing in basically this ability to be adaptable over time. That's something that's really important with our design work. And sort of a very poignant example would be, for instance, healthcare. We don't actually do healthcare at BCJ, but something that I understand is that you could design a project that has based around certain equipment, and that equipment can change by the time the construction is done, and then you have to change out all the equipment. So
might not even be able to get it in the lift.
Right. So similarly, with our user groups in higher ed projects, their thinking might change over the course of that design and construction, and our design work has to be adaptable enough and flexible enough that it can accommodate that change. When the project is done and they're opening, they might change a bunch of stuff around. And so we're always factoring in that level of flexibility and adaptability into our design work.
I love that. I love that. So let's jump all the way back now. We know why you're an architect. We discussed at the start that, talking about, say, the origin story and how that's really important to you. Tell me about that. Tell me about how you formulate from the origin story, or what you're looking for in the origin story.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and it might actually tie to sort of my progress from school to this practice now at BCJ. Immediately after I went to school, I didn't go into architecture immediately. I actually worked for a muralist for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Professionally, yeah, a muralist by the name of Doug Cooper. And Doug was and still is a professor at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, which is where I went to school. And he did teach and does teach currently architectural drawing. And it's a series of 3 semesters worth of architectural drawing that all the undergraduate students have to take. And it's something that I immediately gravitated toward. I absolutely loved that level of coursework, and it built upon my interest in art and exploration in art. And I absolutely adored Doug as well as a mentor and colleague and friend. And I continued after that series of courses. I worked for him during school as a teaching assistant, and then he offered me a job to work full-time professionally with him on this mural work, and I couldn't pass it up. So I did that for 2 years after school. It was an amazing opportunity. And the work that he does as a teacher
Mm-hmm.
is he teaches these architecture students how to visualize these complex spaces and not only create drawings that represent the space as they see it, but how it actually comes together and is constructed. So it really does help train the architectural eye to understand space and construction, which is really fascinating.
I
So
think
we
it's a piece of genius. Yep.
we would go to, the Carnegie Museum, so these historical buildings that were really and various places around campus at Carnegie Mellon, and which is the original CMU campus is 100 years old, Henry Hornbostel. So a lot of complexity in the buildings, and we'd be able to go into a space and start drawing it in a way that says, okay, this is how these arches were created, and the reason why it's built in this way is because of these reasons, and we would be able to develop that in the drawings that we do, but also in a way not only for our own knowledge, but to be able to communicate that well. And so creating drawings that show hierarchy of space and void and play with all these really interesting things. So I loved working for that. So that's what he taught as far as his architectural drawing series in school. As a muralist, his explorations were really about this storytelling through history. And the medium that we used was charcoal on paper.
Oh, wow.
So it was all black and white,
Yeah, and also a reasonably tough medium. Yeah.
Yeah. And the charcoal was fascinating because you can create such a variety of line work and depth and precision if you wanted to. So it was an excellent medium that's so different than like a pencil or some of these other tools that we have as architects. The charcoal was really fascinating to use. So I had the luxury of being able to explore that for 2 years after I graduated school.
Wow.
And I think that's looking back now, and it's been a great opportunity.
I was it Doug Cooper?
That's right. Yeah.
Cool. You got to send me some so that we can post with it. And is he still around?
He is. He still teaches at CMU, close to retirement age. And he has several
You've got to
books.
introduce me.
Yeah.
Do you know, I when you're telling me that story, my father's a fine artist, and my father's 96, so he doesn't actually do any art anymore. And I say it like he doesn't actually. He's got early onset dementia, but that's at 96. That's probably not so early. I don't know, but it means that he isn't really sketching. He does the odd piece of sketching and stuff, but he used to be a fine watercolor artist and all the rest. And I grew up with a pencil in my hand, with pens in my hand, and I love to draw. I wouldn't call myself an artist, I call myself a designer, because I only really draw for the pleasure of selling it to somebody or doing it for a purpose. To just look at a landscape and draw it really takes me a whole nother kind of mental space. It's got to have a kind of an outcome that I've been tasked to do. But with that, Michael Malone loves to draw. And he draws, I don't know, when Michael goes on holiday, I'm not sure that how he does it, because he posts so many pictures of things, buildings that he's drawing. I'm like, Michael, what, do you just send the family and your wife off for lunch or something? Because these things aren't like 2-minute sketches, like these things take time, and they're beautifully done in a very open freehand style, which I really enjoy. So yeah, I think the art of drawing and the art of, when people say to me they want to become an architect or they want to become a designer or whatever, one of the things I say to them is I say, are you really serious about it? And they'll go, yeah. And I go, cool. And I'll give them a pad, like a sketch block and a pencil, just an HB pencil, and say, okay, go and draw some buildings. And then you find out if they're serious or not. First one is do they draw a building? The other is, if they do draw a building, how much detail do they put into it? And I say to them, watch how light and shade falls on the building, and then look at the number of layers of complexity there are in a building, how many pieces it takes. Each one of those is a piece of construction, just like you're saying. And you've got to think about the size and the weight and everything else that's happening. And that's how you don't necessarily learn construction, but you learn to observe what needs to happen to make something work. And then you can go and find out how it was constructed to actually hold it there. But otherwise, you just kind of take it in. Just take it in. You don't actually go and like narrow right in. And when you're drawing and every line goes on a piece of paper, especially with charcoal, there's no taking it off easily.
Right.
It's there, and you've got to work with what you've got. I love that story. I so love it. So back to the origin story. So you did that. That was school. And then after school, you got 2 years of drawing. Amazing. I can't wait to see. And then what?
So pretty soon thereafter, I worked for a small firm immediately after working with Doug, and then pretty soon thereafter started working with Bolin, Sywinski, Jackson, BCJ,
Yeah.
and have been here for 17 years. Actually, 17 years as of 2 weeks ago. So
Awesome.
And that's the end of the story.
That's the end of the story. You're still there.
I'm still here, yes.
But in your time there, things must have changed a lot in what you produce in the firm, you know, the kind of projects you work on. And I know that this whole K to 12, you said before, because I had to get this, I didn't know what K to 12 was. Is that, you know, like, I don't know, what's K to 12? And I found out it was kindergarten to 12th grade. But this is a passion of yours, working in this space. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so K through 12. So within the practice, we do all sorts of work. And I think Ray and Daniel and some of the other folks from BCJ that you've spoken with have expressed, you know, the array of work that we do, from residential to commercial to higher ed. But one of the sort of areas that we do enjoy and have done quite a bit of recently, really over the last 10 years, is this K through 12 work, largely secondary education. So kind of the high school level, middle school to high school level for public school districts. I'm currently working on a public high school project, new construction that's happening here in Pittsburgh. Independent schools all over the East Coast, West Coast, Texas, and even some nonprofit. So Waldorf School, which I had mentioned to you earlier, and the work with the K through 12 is very different from the higher education work. It's interesting in that the folks that we engage with are so passionate about the space, and they always say, and it is the case, that it's really about the student. You really have to focus about how these students are engaging with the space, because you're creating environments for the future leaders of this country and their various disciplines, whatever they're going to be. And they're so, they learn so much and they soak in so much. And you're really focusing on how you can create spaces that promote their growth and their wellness. And there's so much hope and energy in those projects. It's just wonderful. It's really an interesting sort of typology to be able to engage with people who are so focused on nurturing young students so that you can give them the foothold to be the next leaders of the country. It's a difficult task, and you're always trying to make sure that are you living up to this task? But it just emotionally, it's very impactful.
I think there's something amazing about, as you say, this energy that, I want to say older people, and I don't mean when I'm older, I just mean, more mature people, adults, have around the responsibility of education of younger people, like of giving them an experience that was beyond the experience they got, or was more thoughtful than the experience they got. And it's a wonderful thing, and I suppose it's what keeps evolution moving. It's part of that. It's somewhere in there, it's tapped into us to do it. But I know what you're talking about from that Montessori project, just seeing the amount of dedication and energy and support that people gave towards that project for a new green school, new greenfield school. Yeah, I totally get it. And I've spoken to some others, obviously, that have done school work as well. And it's that passion that lights them up. So tell us about Waldorf School.
So we just over the last, I want to say it started in 2017. So pre-pandemic, we started working on the Waldorf School of Pittsburgh, a new 8th grade classroom for them. And this is officially my smallest project that I've worked on. It's less than 1,000 square foot, but it is a standalone building that's less than 1,000 square foot, new construction, and a wonderful client, nonprofit group that the aim was to build an 8th grade classroom, which is the highest level of students that they educate within.
Yeah. And then where do they go from there? They go to
they go to a variety of schools throughout the city. Some may go to magnet schools, some may go to independent schools, private schools. Some may go into the public school system, but they absolutely have this amazing foundation in order to be able to navigate all of these very different systems. One of the interesting sort of challenges with this classroom that we built, which is called the Heartwood Annex, is similar to what you were saying, Adrian, with the Montessori school that you mentioned. The 8th graders are seen as the stepping stone, like the 8th grade level is seen as the stepping stone effectively to sort of your grown up and your teenage and your adult.
Your teenage adolescent years. Yeah.
That's right. So we intentionally situated this Heartwood Annex project away from the main buildings on campus because it was intended to show through design to show the students that they are growing up and they do need to separate from some of these younger kids, from the preschoolers and the kindergartners, and they do need to have their own space to be able to flex. And I work very closely with the head of school for this project. I continue to work with her, but she has a really interesting take on the students because they're so when they go into the Heartwood Annex project, they're so excited to be able to have a space that's their own and feel like they are growing up. But by the time graduation comes along, they still have those tears like, oh, am I really ready to leave? This place has been nurturing me for so long. Am I really ready to leave? So it's this sort of push and pull that the students have. But this project is pursuing a certification that is very rigorous and sustainable. It's through the Living Future Institute. It's called the Core Green Building Certification, RE Green Building Certification.
Oh, okay, cool. Yep.
Yeah, and it's tied to the Living Building Challenge. So it's from the same organization, the Living Future Institute. But with this certification, it's very rigorous, and there's so much passion in showing not only that we've met this challenge of creating a space for these students, but that the space is healthy and they have access throughout this space with daylight and views, and they're connected with nature, and we're putting in responsible materials, and we're conscientious of the energy use and the water use, and beyond doing that from a design perspective and operational standpoint, we are communicating to the students that these are the things that we did. So because we want to, again,
educational,
educate them. So there's so many aspects of this very ambitious project that, has no economy of scale. It's a tiny project, and the ambition is astronomical. And like many of our very complex technical lab buildings for higher ed, this little gem has so much complexity. But what I love about it is there's so much passion. And even if they have fewer resources to achieve it, there's so much passion and ambition that you want to give so much to make sure that it's successful.
It engages you so deeply, and it creates innovation.
Yeah.
You've got to be innovative. You don't get there by being old school or slow and lazy with it. You get there by being innovative and reactive and then proactive, and then like you're constantly in that space, your favorite space of reinvention or new invention, like it keeps you moving. You talking about it, just the spark in your eyes alone is just amazing.
So I did also, one of the things that I really like about this K through 12 work is it ties very closely also to this nonprofit and cultural work that I really enjoy. And I've had the privilege working with BCJ to work on a series of cultural projects, including the Frick Environmental Center. That's a project that was completed about 4 or 5 years ago. Same level of rigor and complexity, but just a space that really does, at the end of the day, through all of its complexity and ambition, really does create a space that allows people to be connected to nature, allows for experiential education, environmental education in a way that is very emotional and visceral for the users who go there. So working with the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy on that project.
So what is that? What is the project? What does it do?
So that project,
yeah,
the Frick Environmental Center in Pittsburgh, it is an environmental education facility that actually teaches environmental education to
like young students or to all levels?
So actually a variety of students, but they do programs with a variety of public schools throughout the region and teaching really effectively city kids how to be able to understand nature, engage with nature, what the value of stewardship is. And so if you can teach young children to understand and appreciate nature, they will grow up to become stewards of nature. And that's really what it's trying to do, is effectively create a cycle of stewardship within the city of Pittsburgh, because the Parks Conservancy, which was founded by a woman named Meg Cheever, she developed it at a time when the city of Pittsburgh and the parks were really deteriorated from a perspective of, the parks themselves were really unhealthy. So this Frick Environmental Center is really a culmination of decades of work to help the city understand the value of the park system and why it's important for anyone at any age to really help promote the parks for vitality and personal health, mental health, all of these things. And so this project is really the culmination of all of that effort. And it's just a physical manifestation of it, but there's so much more to it that, again, with diving into complex projects, trying to take on this responsibility as an architect and a practitioner of these decades of work that's trying to change a city and a community. These are the things that really, I'm passionate about, I really enjoy. So that's just the little smallest nugget on a very complex story.
I'd like to thank Stetson Hats Australia for providing my amazing collection of open road Stetson hats. Since 1865, John B. Stetson has been crafting legendary headwear, adorning the heads of Western icons like Annie Oakley and George Custer. The open road hat debuted in 1937, beloved by artists, outlaws, presidents alike. Its timeless style fits the setting from city streets to open plains. Whether in the cab of a truck or my trusty Mini Cooper, the open road is all style. If you think hats aren't for you, you just haven't found the right one yet. Discover yours at stetsonaustralia.com or stetson.com if you're in the USA. Thanks, Stetson, for your support. Please share your Stetson moment by emailing me your photo to talkdesign@gmail.com. Let's celebrate the timeless allure of Stetson together.
But so another project that I'm currently working on It's for the Clearwater Conservancy, which is a
Uh-huh.
nonprofit in central Pennsylvania, and they do riparian zone restoration, so edge of stream restoration. They oversee, they don't own, but they oversee about 10,000 acres worth of land and work with farmers to help improve land in a way that helps to improve the streams. They also oversee, I think it's like 25 miles worth of streams throughout the central Pennsylvania area, but we're creating a new headquarters for them. And it's a really fun project. It is using an existing old barn, effectively a dilapidated old barn that's 100 years old, and trying to reimagine it into this new headquarters space for their staff. There's a component that's a community room, so being able to bring community into their home to not only share, the programs that they do to help educate the community about riparian zone restoration and teach farmers what like techniques that they can use to help manage their own land. So again, a passionate group of individuals we are a small component
Yep.
of the passion that they and the impact that they have on the community. And our task is to create a space that within this old barn and sort of honor the magic of this space and do it in a way that represents the passion that this organization has for the community. So easy task, right?
Done. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That didn't take much thought, will it? Yeah. It's a barn. Hey, what can you do? It's fascinating though, isn't it? Like, I mean, what a lovely, brief or a lovely brief to you have to be so considerate and you have to do it on so many multiple layers. And then in this case, you've got something that you already physically have to work with in size, shape, materiality. Yeah. Again, to me, I go, oh, I can see the passion in you. And I go, wow, that's exciting. And I would want you to do it. Because I would want to be involved in it, but I wouldn't want to be the one who had to run it as such. I'd be like, man, this can get complex quick. And also just the stakeholders, being able to deal with so many different stakeholders in something like that. And when people are at a passionate level of what they're doing, it's not like the single-minded developer who's how many square feet do I have to put on this whatever to get X number of dollars in return. This is people talking about returning the planet and making sure that it's there for multiple generations beyond. And so they are highly aware of their view of the world, and they're prepared to do so many things that create discomfort for themselves to make that world better for somebody else. Yeah. And then you're part of it. I love it.
That's right.
I love it. And with a small part, but also you're so dedicated to delivering on that part with the same intensity of them delivering on the part that they're doing. And, I think that when architecture responds to people's, cultural passions or their personal passions and their cultural sensitivity, as well as the use of, it's going to be for shelter. And it's as easy as that, shelter and security. But when it's going to do those things, but then that's the passport, that's just the simple stuff. Then it's how does it respond, and how does it make people lift people up? How does it make them feel proud? How does it make them feel engaged? How do they come on that journey? Or how do you get to be walking with them, not just calling them over or leading them somewhere? You're walking with them and finding the nuances. It's exciting.
It is very exciting.
It makes it very worthy, doesn't it?
It does.
How's your things around, or your thinking around building biology? Because this is a field that isn't huge yet. It is, but it isn't hugely communicated yet. You know, we talk about building science and stuff, but building biology back in the design stages, and, you know, we were saying before about materiality of schools and stuff, and then making sure these are a healthy environment from a material point of view, as well as from a physical space point of view, so that they're nurturing and so that they give back in multiple ways. I've had a couple of conversations with building biologists on the show, and we're talking about, you know, how material can nurture humans as opposed to take from them. And there's a lot of biohackers out there that are very conscious of this. When you get into passionate groups of people, just like you're saying with the conservatory type people, the biohacking kind of community is switching on to this. And then you go, so when we're doing, use education again and the young education again, people are suddenly really conscious of, you know, what is that paint type? But not only that, the architecture as well. You know, we're saying to somebody the other day, you know, car fumes, and, you know, where a car would be in relation in a house. So you have an attached garage and you open the door and the car goes in, fills it with fumes. You open the door, those fumes come into the house, they're heavy metals, blah, 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 blah. I was saying to somebody the other day, so what will shift when everything's electric or hydrogen or whatever it becomes? What will shift in that space in architecture? So when you're doing these things, how much building biology comes into, or the study of building biology comes into the program?
That is an amazing question. I don't think I've ever heard that term, but just the way that you speak about it makes me think that you have this. I think if architects have a natural understanding of how buildings really have been built over centuries, you start to understand the nature of, I think, what you're referring to as building biology. If you have a piece, for instance, if you have a farmhouse and you have a fireplace, where does it really want to be in order to make the space feel well? Does it want to be separated out? Are you going to start now in our modern times and contemporary architecture to start overlapping things that wouldn't really have made sense, 100 years ago or 200 years ago? And I think if you have a natural understanding of how things used to be built, then you might have a good understanding of building biology now and how you can challenge things. And that is a very specific way of answering your question.
Yeah, no, it's good.
I think if you were to, but if you were to think of it in a more sort of technical and rigorous and certification kind of hat, you'd say, okay, well, if you look at specific materials right now, you have an understanding of, are there healthy materials that are out there? There's a big push in the industry to have transparency in materials. And so you can look at it to some extent as just product by product, the space that I'm creating going to be healthy with respect to the materials. You could think about, and one thing that we really like to do is express the truth in materials, and always using true materials as much as possible. So if we're using brick on a building, does that brick come into the interior of the space because it is a true material and you know that it is a safe material and you can engage with it and you understand how to engage and know that material. So we always try to bring truth in materials within our design work. And then just thinking about, if you have materials that are exposed in certain ways, how does that affect the space? So is the material going to get hot and cold because it's, next to a window? Is the nature of that material going to change and impact you because it's getting hot and cold? Or if it's close to a fireplace and it gets really hot and cold,
what happens with that material? Yeah. Does it change it?
So it's like, is there a living character to the stuff that we're building? I think at a very, again, having for the first time just heard that term, I that's where my mind would go immediately. I'm curious if that's
I'm going to introduce you to some
reality now.
people. Well, it is reality. I mean, it give you some really basic examples. One of the ones that I don't know much about, and I don't know much about any of it, to tell you the truth, but I do know people who know a lot about it, is just having conversation with, like in Australia, there's 12 building biologists. That's it. And population 24 million people, something like that. Anyway, with it, we were talking about EMFs, so, electromagnetic fields and what effect they have on people, etc., etc. This wasn't on a podcast, but we can make one of it. And just getting those readings. And of course, there's electromagnetic fields in the ground as well. And when we intuitively walk over different things in the ground, some pieces of ground feel better than others. There's reasons for things, just these things. And then when we accelerate those, maybe with tin roofs and solar panels or whatever it is, what happens to the occupants of a place? That would be one kind of example. Another might be if we were using, I don't know whether you call it render, but like a cement rendered coating on the inside of a building or even on the outside of a building. We do it a lot. They'll brick something up, then they'll render over it. The difference between that being a lime-based plasterwork or being a cement-based plasterwork has a difference in the gassing that it has into the room, just like low VOC paints, no VOC paints, or, like chalk powdered paints, these kinds of things. LED lights, how they shift your circadian rhythms, all these kinds of things are part of building biology in small pieces, and then there's bigger pictures and bigger pictures. So I'm going to introduce you to some people. That'll be fun. You'll enjoy it.
And that it just reminds me of a conversation that I had actually yesterday with a mechanical engineer who was talking about harmonics. Nowadays, so many buildings have dimmable lights and different daylight sensors and all of these electronics and equipment within the building express harmonics, because you can just, if you had acute hearing, you could hear that dimmable light is buzzing and humming.
Yep.
And when the whole building is doing that, it starts to impact the users. So it's interesting now as you start to describe it that, I would say, I think now certainly more so than 100 years ago, you're starting to deal with these things and understand it, because buildings are closed in and you don't have the ability for the buildings to breathe as much. And so you're trying to create healthy spaces that are regenerative and promote wellness, but they're these boxes that are, totally secured and tight. And so how do you balance those two approaches? But
we've got a rabbit hole there that we could go down so easily, but we'll do it in another podcast. I have this issue over, well, not issue. I just have this question that runs with all that stuff, which is, we go back to the, Howard Hughes story and how he became sort of his phobia of dust and germs and all these things, and slowly got his world down to being a room from this guy who was this amazing inventor and, say he expanded the world, but he ended up shrinking his world to tiny over this phobia of dust and germs and things like that. And I had a conversation the other day with an architect from Australia, Peter Stutchbury, and very, very renowned architect in Australia. And we talked about the fact of this, how culture is, I'm talking our Western world culture at the moment, that is kind of separating us, behind walls, behind gates, behind intercontrolled environments. So, more sort of like, I want to say things like passive house, and I'm not anti-passive house, but I am anti-passive house in the wrong climate conditions. But we get more and more and more and more and more and more, and now we're living in a manufactured a manufactured environment. And if you put that akin to growing a vegetable organically in your garden versus picking up a piece of processed food and eating it. For instance, processed meats are a known carcinogenic. They're grade 1 carcinogenic. Go to the deli, you'll find thousands of them. Yeah, I'm sure that, so maybe Sorrento ham or something that's been hung in a cave in the mountains in Spain or Italy, done the old way, is not a carcinogenic. So when you look at this, it's like, are we doing this with housing? Are we separating ourselves down? Our mental health has gone up, or cases of mental health has gone up so considerably that anxiety levels of kids and teenagers and their inability to necessarily easily to integrate with other people face to face, to be with people. They would rather text, they would rather message, they would rather use a platform, they'd rather put a mask on by putting, a Snapchat mask or whatever, a funny face or whatever. All these pieces that just sort of are pulling us back rather than setting us free into the world. Anyway, that's another podcast, I'm sure. But it's interesting when you start with your K through 12. Because it's not the intention of any one of those schools or places or anything else. It's to expand the mind, not to collapse the environment and bring it in.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just because I've been working with these really fantastic clients who get it and who understand the importance of being open and allowing the students to be able to breathe and creating spaces that are indoor outdoor spaces so that they can have class outside. It's maybe I've just been really fortunate to be able to work with the clients who understand that.
And maybe they've been really fortunate to work with you.
Yeah.
Because you embrace it the same as them. I want to, you mentioned bricks before, and about just this honesty in materials and being very conscious of that, and then also how the material is used, is it external, internal, that I don't know, rawness of this. And I know you've been working on some projects around bricks, and I think that bricks are obviously one of our oldest building materials ever. Still pretty economical as a building material, totally recyclable as a building material. And maybe the mortar isn't. Yeah, well, it is, but it's how it gets recycled. I think they're the most beautiful thing when done really well, and the fact that it's kind of pottery and all of it. Well, it is pottery. And if you think of the artworks in pottery and glazes and things like that, and to think that we can do that with bricks, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so that's a great segue into something that we've been exploring a little bit more in our Pittsburgh studio. So as you know, and as you've mentioned, our practice is across the country, and we have 5 different offices. And I think over the course of our 60 or so years that we've been in practice, I think in general, the practice has really understood the value of having a truth in materials. So it's part of the culture of the practice to be able to understand craft and be able to communicate design through craft, not just through overall building conceptually, massing how different spaces come together, but craft is such a huge component of how we express our design language and how we create connection for our users and our visitors and people to understand the human aspect of design. So craft is something that is entirely interwoven into the culture of our practice. And just currently over the last, I want to say 5 to 10 years within the Pittsburgh studio, we've been diving really deep into brick and being able to explore different ways to express brick in a variety of ways. So I wanted to mention a couple of projects that we've done recently on Carnegie Mellon campus. One that's near and dear to my heart, Ansys Hall, where a project that was built adjacent to and abutting these 100-year-old buildings. And on that campus, the campus was originally designed and conceived by Henry Hornbostel, which I don't know if you know anything about him, but he was really an innovator. It's interesting. He really tested materiality and craft. And what we've tried to do in a contemporary form is to use his theory of testing craft and testing how certain materials can come together to be really expressive and create connection in a really humane way. And so with ANSYS Hall and then a series of other projects that we've been working with on campus, we've been able to explore that. So some of the things that we're trying to express through this materiality and just test and play with in a really fun way is how you can create texture with brick that starts to emphasize light and shadow, how to, looking more largely at a building, how to create mass and void, and how that can create contemporary representation of historic sort of design concepts. We're starting to look at how brick can be constructed in different ways and how the construction can be expressed through the design. So creating panelized brick sort of textures. And it's been a lot of fun. We just recently had two of our projects, ANSYS Hall and TCS Hall, published in a book called Materiality, which is a book
I know
on
the book.
brick. It's a book on brick. And
I can see three of those books sitting in front of me at the moment.
Yeah, and actually in our Philly studio, we did a couple of projects for the University of Pennsylvania that were amazingly expressive of brick, and those have been published in different brick books, you know, as far as the industry. But I think it's something that helps us as architects and designers be able to flex our muscles on these projects that are super complex. But honestly, if you're working on a project that is not 1 year long, it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years long, you're not just focusing on the design concept because, you know, you've pretty much got the design concept, hopefully in the first, I'm going to just say year. Hopefully in the first year, you've gotten the design concept
or
right
before. Yeah.
or within the first day, month, year. But you've gotten that design concept really strong, and it ties to the program and the user's ambition and all of that stuff. And then from there, how do you keep developing and innovating? And this materiality is an avenue to be able to do that, to be expressive in design language in a way that supports the original design concept, but allows you to connect so much more emotionally and viscerally to the human experience of engaging with these buildings that are oftentimes quite large in scale and complex programmatically and spatially. How do you connect users to that personally and in a humane way? And so this exploration of materiality has allowed us to do that. So that was a long answer to your question.
I love it though. I absolutely love it. I think, like you say, with these natural materials like that have stood the test of time, and they will stand the test of time going forward, then we've got like this, I don't know, oneness of history. We're carrying something from one point to another point, and you get to reinvent. Well, you probably don't actually get to reinvent anything, really. It's probably all been done, just not documented. That you're actually right deep into craft when it comes to that stuff. And I've got a couple of people who I really, really enjoy their brickwork. And when I say their brickwork, like do you know MA Architects, Morris Edgemy?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So Morris is like a brick man. I'll make an introduction for you. He's amazing. You'll enjoy it. And then also, like, just having been with Marlon Blackwell as well, and, you know, his brickwork stuff, just taking a standard brick and just tilting it, just setting it up and tilting it, and just that changes it so much. And there's a guy that I deal with here who is a brickie. He wanders around site whistling and singing. He's the most joyful human, and he travels the world demonstrating brick technique for competitions and stuff like that, as well as for brickworks, companies like them. So it's, like there's something magical about brick that I think is so wonderful, to be able to play with these simple blocks, and whether they're long, thin, whatever. Somewhere close to my desk here, I'm looking around, I just picked up from the Brickwork Center last week a couple of their latest catalogs. So
yeah, one of the nice things about working with a true material like brick is that, especially in Pittsburgh, we have the benefit of having just amazingly skilled tradespeople, because you can, as a designer, you can conceive of any configuration and texture and whatever of the material, but if you don't have someone who can actually execute it and engage with you in the process of understanding what the concept is, and they might have, ideas about how to do any number of things like create efficiency or create the sort of same concept, but do it in a slightly different way. And we've had amazing tradespeople on our projects who we felt, through our interaction with them, have just really embraced the complexity that we're trying to communicate with the brick, because they do their sort of typical everyday project is, or can be, fairly straightforward, and it's sort of the bread and butter stuff. But if they have the ability and are being paid to, do something that really ties to their craft and skill, they get excited about it.
I was about to say they're passionate, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's not only that we feel lucky to be able to work with such skilled tradespeople, but also our designers and our emerging professionals within our practice then start to understand the importance of having a relationship with the person who's actually building something, because you can't be so detached. You can't do good work if you, as a designer and as an architect, are really having only a one-way communication. You do something and then you give it to someone else, and you don't have an understanding of how it's going to get built. We have to be able to communicate to our emerging professionals that, you need to engage in the whole process, because that's how you end up with projects that really are strong and have these emotional connections. So it's good all around.
It is, I think that everybody should, who studies design for building, whether that be a building designer or an interior designer or an architect, should actually go and use their hands at some point, at many points, not some point, at many points, and understand it in a building process, and actually labor on the site and see what happens, not just stand and look and point and all the rest, but actually pick up the thing, the weight of bricks, the weight of blocks, the repetitive movements, all those things. And then the thinking that has to go into it. I don't know whether you've ever tried to lay a brick wall, but if you haven't, it's always a challenge. And you watch a brickie do it and they just do it with ease, they do it, but because it's repetitive and they've got a method and they know the different tricks to making that method work. I remember the first time ever going on site and talking to brickies and stuff, and I wanted to give it a go, and they were like, do you know, they wouldn't let me do it there. They said, you can build something there. And he says to me, so I'd watched him, and he had a bucket of water and he had a big brush, and he would flick the water across the brick. And I thought that wasn't a step that I should be bothered with, because it looked like it's, I don't know. And I did sort of I don't remember asking him at the time, and maybe I started doing it. I can't remember, but I remember saying to him, so why do you wet the brick? And he goes, well, otherwise the cement it won't bond the mortar. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it's as simple as that, but just that little flick, done. So efficiency, Whereas I was like, well, what happens if I put it right in the bucket of water? And he's like, well, you can do that, but you'll have too much water in the brick. You know, you do that if you want to give it a go, kind of thing. But just that thing, and then trying to lay, 30 bricks in a row straight. And they do it all day. And then tilt, I want every one of them tilted, 25 degrees or whatever. But they can do amazing things, and they create artwork out of it. And I think they particularly love when they get somebody who is like me, who's probably a smart ass enough to want to give it a go. And they love to see me fail in it. They love to see me not necessarily fail, but they know I don't have the knowledge or whatever. But then they're happy to share that. They love to see you get into the struggle space. And then they're like, well, let me teach you, or let me show you, let me guide you in it.
Yeah, I mean, it is an art, and you can't disregard the skill that's required to do it. And so I think that's what they're trying to remind you, is that, yeah, there is skill and it is art, and give it a go. And then
it will teach you.
Give you some tricks. Yeah.
And you look at these columns like where they're spiraled and then cantilevering over, and it might make an arch of spiraled bricks, and you go, somebody gave it a go. I mean, they must have got a lot of bricks on their head at some point. But it is an art. It is an art. And I think that when you can bring an art form like that to a building, then you're actually indelibly imprinting onto people the value of something when it becomes artistic as well as it is a functional item. And that's a joy. That's the art piece of architecture. That's a joy in architecture, yeah, the building having a story, or the whatever it is. I love it. Well, I want to ask you a few final questions. One is, what I ask these questions of many people, so you might have heard them. One is your favorite space in your own home. What is it? What emotion does it evoke?
Interesting. So I don't know if I've told you this, Adrian, but I live on a farm, and it's a large farm. And I would say probably
with like cows, or with sheep, or what?
Some animals, some sheep, some chickens. Yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, cool.
But I would say definitely my favorite space at my home, which is my farm, is being outside, and wherever
to
you
hell
want
with architecture. I'll be outside. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think I spend all day inside buildings, and one of the things that I found, I have to commute a pretty far distance to get into work every single day. And what I find is that throughout the course of the week, I am rarely spending any time outside of a building. I'm often, from when it's dark in the morning to basically when it's dark at night, I'm inside a building, inside our office. And when I get home, I don't have the ability to go outside and to be able to enjoy the farm. It's just a flash of green, and then I go inside and do the whole family routine. And it's only on the weekends where I can actually sit back and say, oh, I live on a farm. I have this big piece of property that I can actually engage with nature and sort of take a breath. And so that's one of the benefits of being on the farm on the weekend, is that, unfortunately, I'm going to answer your question with a non-architectural response, but it's just actually being outside.
It's great. I think that your little piece there where you said, where you can take a breath, I think it's about breathing out as much as it is breathing in. And, you go back to that conversation that you just had about, the layering of the harmonics of a building, and the difference in the harmonics of nature, and actually being able to put your feet on the land. And I have this that I call land whispering, which I do when I'm going to site a house or go to a piece of land to find, where it is. And it involves like everything from watching the land wake up in the morning to going to sleep at night, to walking on it in bare feet often, to being sitting and contemplative, to listening, to smelling, to, you know, everything that comes with that piece of land, to finding where it's what we call, or I call, the sacred spots, which they feel really good. And finding those things and then being really aware of, you know, the thing, maybe fire risk or the awareness of flooding, and looking at where the land's natural contours have formed over time, just exploring it. That, to me, I think if I only ever had to go put the house here and then walk away again, would be, but orient it like this, and I want the sun coming, I would have a few more directions. That to me would be the bliss. I'd just walk around doing that all day long.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, and try and keep my finger out of the pie of actually what the house had to be or the building had to be. But just, yeah, there's something magical. And that's probably why I'm sort of that whole love of building biology, and then what materiality, and then how that forms, you know, like trying to get people to have a carport instead of a garage, so that they actually cross, not necessarily open, it might be roof, but open space, and they feel nature as they cross over, rather than in the garage and out. And that doesn't work for every climate, but just in the right climates, those kinds of things. Oh, but we want a door, but why? You know, like, it's just this, yeah, just a different level of engagement. And then there's this cultural pressure to do different other things with it as well. And how do you break those norms and play? So being outside on your farm, like, happy space. Awesome. Awesome. And my other one, my favorite one, is one last project. Can't do any more. This is it. You're finished. You're done. There is no more architecture in your world. One last project. What do you choose?
Yeah, another good zinger question. I would say in my career, largely at BCJ, because I've been here for virtually the entirety of my career, I would say that I am very happy with everything that I've done. And if I had to walk out the door today and say, this is it, this is what you've got, I think I would be very happy. I feel like I've had a really good go at things, and all of the projects that I've worked on, I've had so much, there's so much complexity and so much emotion that I've given to each project to make it successful, and engaging with all the people involved, and I walk away and it, like, there's so much that I'm thankful for, that if I had to stop today, I would say I'm happy, I'm good. There's no more that could fill me up to 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 try to give me more gold stars. I don't need any more. Like, I've done so much in so many different ways, with different programs, with universities, with young kids, with cultural work, with all of these different things, that I feel very happy with what I've done and very fortunate. So I would say I don't need any more to make me feel better about myself, or feel like I've contributed enough. I feel like it's good, and I feel very fortunate about that. I don't know
Wow.
if that's a good enough answer.
I don't know whether that was a dodge or an answer. And I totally respect, like, yeah, you've had so much that you've got to do, and that you can't necessarily go, well, I'd do this because it would be different, because all your cups are filled. Well, they've got water in them. You know, they might not be full, but they've got water in them, and it's all good water. Like, so I totally get that. There's no space that you haven't explored that you go, oh, if I did that, that would be, it may be in more depth than you've already done.
I might
What?
have
Oh,
to.
I've got a better question then.
Yeah.
What project would you turn down if it arrived on your desk tomorrow?
That is a much harder question to answer.
It is much harder. I think that the answer of your answer just before was fabulous, and I'm pretty sure it was Tom Kundig said, well, I'd just start something I could never finish. So that was his answer. It was something along those lines, like, I'd just pick a project that I could never finish, because he doesn't want to ever stop designing. But what would be a project that you would say no to? And that's a really hard one for any designer or architect, because it's almost like admitting defeat in a way, isn't it? It's almost like,
yeah, I mean,
because there's always a way to make something right with what you do.
yeah, I mean, again, that's a real zinger that you're giving me, but I would say, again, kind of doubling down that, there's so much passion that goes into each project that I would say the one that I have an answer.
You've got
for you.
one.
The one that I would turn down is the one that's too simple, that's too easy, that doesn't require thought, that's a duplicate of something that I've already done. If someone were to say to me, I want you to give me exactly what you've done before in this project because that is perfect and I want you to replicate it, I would say, nope, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore.
Wait, I don't do that. I don't do that. It's got there's a nuance in that program somewhere.
Yeah. And if the job and if this career ever got to the point where it felt like this is repetitive and I'm redoing stuff that I've already done and feel really complete with, then I know it would be time to maybe hang up.
100%. 100%, because your whole passion is driven right back to that start point. And the adventurer in you is extreme. Like, I mean, you're in it for the architecture. Well, no, you were in it for the money because it pays well. Little did you know. They should modify that. Yeah. For everybody, it is, architecture is a love. There's plenty of jobs that you could do with all your skills that would pay you a lot more money, but it would never necessarily bring out the passion the same as architecture. It's incredible. But your whole being is about being the adventurer. It's about stepping into new space and not letting it overwhelm you, but finding your path and finding the path, and then making sure the path is well marked and deliberate and consciously done. That's the person you are. Everything you've told me is about that. And if the adventures run out, it's like, what's my life's purpose? It is, though. It's incredible. I love it. What a fabulous chat. Thank you so much for sharing so much and so honestly, and like, it's just, yeah, beautiful. Really, really beautiful.
It's been fun.
Made my day. Thank
Made
you.
your morning.
Made my morning. Yeah, exactly. It's 7:57 now for me AM, and I'm going surfing. Patricia, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Adrian.
Thank you for tuning into our conversation. I hope it left you both informed and inspired. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen, and please don't hesitate to share your design thoughts with me. It's always a joy to hear from you. If you're like me and crave a deeper dive into design thinking, coupled with a love for travel and adventure, consider one of my architectural adventures. Join me and some of my wonderful design friends and embark on a journey of a lifetime. Apply for an unforgettable design experience at adrianramsey.com. With our clients spanning the globe, I firmly believe behind every great project are great people. If you're a great person and seeking to turn your dream into a reality, I'd be honored to design your home with you. Why not join the ranks of our exceptional clients? And let's make your heart sing. Reach out to me at studio@ardesignhouse.com. That's studio@ardesignhouse.com. And let's get a conversation going and make your heart sing.